Okay, so as a brief, like what we have seen yesterday is we have seen few scopes. So when I talk about scope, that is nothing but this rectangle box, in the sense like I can say the entire day 16 scope flow. So this entire rectangle box as one scope or one flow. So whatever I'm using inside this, so the lifetime of that will be within this. Okay, so basically, if I say like this logger scope is within this particular rectangle box, right? So this is the general concept of a scope, right? We have a few scopes which are available with us in pure palette section. So you cannot type those as a scopes, but we have named it as a scopes. The reason is yesterday we have seen a few scopes, nothing but like we have seen asynchronous scope, and then we have seen for each, and also we have seen until successful. Three items we have seen yesterday, right? So what happened is like whatever we are putting, that means whatever we are putting inside that particular box or that particular scope, so the lifetime of that is within that, and it is performing a different operation. So we have seen how async scope works, how for each works, and also how until successful works, right? So as a continuation, we will see few other scopes which are available with us. So primarily, like we'll start our day by comparing for each, and there is something called parallel for each. Anyway, for each we have seen yesterday, but still I'll bring something else also today for each. So we'll see for each and parallel for each. There is one big difference between these two. So I'll tell what is the difference and how this is working and how for parallel for each working. So we'll see the differences between these two. And apart from that, like we have few other scopes, like we have something called cache scope, and how cache works and what is the mechanism it is, following. All these things we will see. And then finally we will see something called batch processing. Okay, if time permits, we will see like what is batch processing and how batch processing works. So if you ask me, all these three are equally important. Like basically any of the scope that we are seeing, so those are very important. Like in your real time, you may need to use this one in your real time project depending upon the scenario. So just to saying like this, these connectors or the scopes are equally important, like what we have seen in these many days, right? So yeah, so having said this, like starting for the day, yesterday we have demonstrated a for each by having some loggers, right? We had a few loggers inside and outside for each, and we have passed array object as a payload and array as a payload. So depending upon your array size, the number of objects within that array, your for each will get iterated that many times. We have seen that, and there is no big configuration logic behind the for each. It is very simple and straightforward configuration, right? So guys who have not joined yesterday, like it will be recap for you, or it will be one more new session for you, just to try to focus. Yeah. So what I have done here is, okay, or else I'll bring one more only. I'm going to bring for each. The same image replacement I'm going to configure. Okay, then yesterday we have seen using logger inside for each, right? Today we will see using insert operation, one database insert operation I'm going to have, and how for each inserts data and how parallel for each inserts data we will see. Yeah. So insert operation, simple, insert statement, what we have seen already. The same query I'm using here. I'm going to give dynamic data. So what I'll be giving my request payload is employee ID, name, and PH number I have to give. Right. So this is what the payload I'll be sending from outside. Once it is, get into parallel for each, it will iterate like that many number of times, how many objects I'm sending, in fact, right? So I'm not going to give collection here. A counter variable I'm going to leave as it is, and root message variable I'm going to leave as it is. I'm not going to touch anything at all. Okay. Then in this logger, I'm going to say and then the same message I'm going to give back. Great. So let me deploy it. Simple.
Hello, sir.
Yeah,
Hello, sir. Sir, instead of that message, we can give payload means what will do it will print, sir.
that is what we have seen on the other day, right? Insert will give a payload in a form.
No, sir. No, sir. No, sir. In transfer message, we written one message, no, sir.
Correct.
Instead of that message, if you give payload means
That is what.
that's
So if I mention payload, what it will print, the content of the payload will be printed, right? So at
yes,
this
sir.
moment, what is there in the payload that will be getting print or getting sent to your postman. But I'm saying like I'm using insert operation, right? So after this, I will not have a payload. So I'll show it in a debug mode.
Okay, sir. Understood.
I'll show it in the debug mode. This is here. Data source. So I have not started my database. That is why it is saying. So in meantime, like the parallelly, I'll do one more thing. The same flow, I'll try to replicate with parallel for each this time. Let it get deployed. In the meantime, I'll do it. Okay, deployed. So I must specify the payload. So I'm going to take the payload from here. This time I'm going to send JSON payload. Yes. So basically what I'm sending is I'm sending an array payload and which is having 3 objects, right? Each object have a information about employee. 501, 502, and then 503. So 3 payload I'm sending. We all know, like, since I'm sending 3 objects, so our for each will get iterated 3 times. For that, let me add a breakpoint here. Right, so if you see, my first object is there in the payload, and this is going to get inserted successfully. And then before writing the log, let me clear the console. Then log printed, and second iteration, second information printed, then logger, then third log message printed. So it came out. So what is there inside my payload? What I'm sending in my payload, the same I'm having it. The reason is I have not touched my payload anywhere at all. Since I have not touched my payload, what I'm sending in my request will be there in the response. Right? So I don't want to have this in my payload. I wanted to override with just this particular inserted successfully. I'm going to send it back to postman. So I have received inserted successfully and true under OK is the status. Now let me go and see how many logs got printed. So there are 3 logs got printed, and each log printed the same message: inserted successfully, inserted successfully, inserted successfully. Okay. Whereas if you see the threads, what it is used, so it is of different thread. Like it did not use the same thread. It may or may not use the same thread. Okay, it may or may not use the same thread. Sometimes you will be experiencing the for each uses the same thread to insert. Sometimes it will use different threads. Reason is like it firstly tried to use the thread number 30, and then after executing that, it will try to look for the same thread. If the thread is available, it will use that thread. If the thread is not available, it will go for another thread. So that is what ideally it does. Not only this, like any of the streaming mechanism, if you see, it will use one particular thread. If that particular thread is available for the next iteration or next execution, it will use that. If that is not available, it will look for some other thread. Okay. And now I'm going to do it again one more time. Let me show with some other ID 511, 512, and then 513. I hit and got a response back. This time, if you see the logger, see here 15 is used, again 15 is used, right? Means these 3 logs are the old one, and these 3 new logs printed. So firstly, it used the thread 15, and again 17 it used, and then since the 15 is available again, it went back to 15. So likewise, it will switch. If it is not available, it will go for some other thread. Okay. It doesn't mean like it is not using the same thread. It may or may not use the same thread. That is what I'm saying, depending upon its availability. One more time, I'm triggering the request. You'll get an error saying there is a primary key issue. Yeah. I'm giving the same employee ID, so I have to change it back. What thread it is used? Again, 17, 15, 17. So that is how it works. Okay. And this is what happens. And for each, we have something called batch size. Yeah, batch size is fine. And there is something called a counter variable, so which will be keep on incrementing, I have told. And I also have told like we can increase the batch size. So if I mention 2 here, instead of processing 1 data at once, it will process 2 data. Okay, so that is also possible. Now let me go to parallel for each. Instead of for each, I'm going to change it back to parallel for each. Let me do it. You can drag and drop parallel for each from here, or else if you are comfortable, you can change it from backend also. Right. The configuration, if you see for parallel for each, it is little different. What I mean to say is, just to click on this, you'll be able to see configuration here. Collection is there here, both in for each and parallel for each. Whereas parallel for each is having some extra configuration, nothing but timeout, maximum concurrency, target. So target, we all know, output of this one, where should I save? So if I'm not specifying any target, it will be saved in a payload. Okay, leave about that. And now these two are very important, like timeout and maximum concurrency. So maximum concurrency is kind of, batch size that we want to specify here, which means parallel for each what happens, no? Um, yeah. So I'm giving, for example, the same payload, nothing but 3 object payload I'm sending. In for each, it picks the first one and process that, then picks the second one, process that, then it picks the third one and process that. In parallel for each, what basically happens behind is, if I do not specify that maximum concurrency, so how many objects I'm sending in my request, for example, if I send 10 objects in my request at once, at very, single moment, there will be 10 flow created. Each flow will have information or value or content of each object. So at once, 10 flow will be created, in the sense virtual I'm saying. 10 flow will be created, and all the flow will try to insert data into database, which means visualization wise, like if you see, we have one insert and one logger, but background, what will happen if I use parallel for each? I give 10 object, maybe, or third 3 objects, then 3 instances will be created at once. So each instance will pick one object and process that. So that is how it works, right? Here, it is not the case in for each. It will pick the first object and one instance will be created. Upon completing that, it comes back and check for the second one. Here, that is not the case. It will pick all at once, then insert that one parallelly. Insert that one parallelly, so there won't be any dependencies at all, right? Let me show that to you. I'm not going to change anything. Maximum concurrency, I'll tell what is that later. And timeout also I'll tell later. Now I have just switched from for each to parallel for each. No other configuration, right? I have not done any other configuration. Let me try to hit this endpoint this time. I've changed the endpoint. Yeah, deployed. So now I'm going to hit that endpoint. So if you debug and see, it will be like a little different. I'll show the difference. See, the insert operation itself is executing 3 times. Earlier, what happened? This insert will insert the first record, and then logger will be executed. Then goes back second record, then goes back third record. But here, it like inserted all these 3 at once, and then it came to logger, right? And if you go and see console, you will not be able to see anything in the console. At the meantime, you go and see in your database, you'll be able to see the information. Okay, employee information, which I have just tried to insert. So 711, 712, 713 is the data which I have sent from my postman. If you see, that is what. So what exactly happened is, you clearly found like it is happening in parallel, in the sense this insert operation got triggered 3 times. All the 3 are triggered at once. So it inserted the data, then it is going forward. If you go and see, you will not be able to see the same. I mean, after this execution of this logger, you will not be able to see the same worker number or thread number, right? 47, 37, 42. So in parallel for each, at all the time, it will be a different threads, which means at the beginning itself 3 instances got created. Instance 1 will use thread number 42, another instance will use 37, and then 42. So that is how it works. Here, it uses the same thread. If the thread is not available, it looks for other thread. Here, it uses a different threads, and all the executions will happen parallelly. Right? So this is how it works. That is a major difference between for each and parallel for each. So Using parallel for each, you can trigger jobs in parallel. In for each, you cannot do that. You can go sequentially one after another only. And for each will use same thread, and parallel for each will never use the same thread for execution. And apart from that, other things are same. Is there any doubts? Because there will be definitely one question from for each and parallel for each during your interview. So, and apart from that, yes, so I don't have anything. So let me do one small correction here. Instead of default maximum concurrency, I'm going to give concurrency as maybe 2. And then timeout is nothing but, for example, this scope, if it takes more than 1 hour, I don't want this to happen. So I can specify the timeout here. After 1 hour, you say error saying like it is getting overtime or it is not getting executed within the time frame what I have defined. Right? You can specify the timeout here. Okay. Now this timeout and all you can configure, like if you are going to handle a huge amount of data for 1 or 2 records, it won't be possible to demonstrate. But if you use a huge amount of data, you can configure the timeout. Now I'm going to give maximum concurrency as 2, which means at once it will process 2 only. It means at once it will process 2 objects or 2 records. So what will happen is it will get 2 threads first, and these 2 threads will be executed. Then it will go for the next record, similar to the batch what we have seen, batch size. Yeah, let me save it. And now I'm going to give, for example, I'm going to give some 6 records. So I have given, what is it? My maximum concurrency is 2, right? What will happen? First time it is going to insert data. Second time going to insert data, then goes to logger, which means there are 2 threads created. One thread inserted first data and second thread inserted second data. Then it comes to back and then picking third and fourth object. Then it may use the same thread or maybe it use different thread. 4 data is inserted so far. That is the reason 4 loggers I'm able to see. So 42 and 05, 86 and 78. So it used 4 different threads only, but it may use the same thread also, since it is a I have limited the concurrencies. So it may use the same also. So it executed 6 times. And then, yeah, see, if you see the 42, thread number 42 is used here and used here as well. Whereas if I do not specify the maximum concurrency, right, it will use the different threads only. So likewise, you can wisely use, maybe at this moment, I'm just giving 3 records or 6 records, right? In real time, we may need to send some thousands of records or maybe 500 records. In that case, if I do not specify maximum concurrency, my project or my application may go down, right? So it is always recommended to specify the maximum concurrency. Depending upon your architect's requirement or his advice, we can configure a maximum concurrency as a 5 or a 10 or 50, 100, something like that. So this is what all about for each and parallel for each. If any questions, we can discuss on that. If not, then we'll move to some other concepts.
Hello, sir.
Yeah, Akhil.
There is a timeout is there, no, sir, in insert.
Yeah.
Sir, how can we think like it is suggesting in minutes or hours or seconds?
So by default, it will be milliseconds only. So for 1 second, you have to give 1000. If I specify 1000, it will consider that as a 1 second.
Okay,
So
sir. Okay.
mulesoft basically, if you are not getting any units, then it is like milliseconds only. Somewhere we will at some places we will be seeing a timeout or any time related thing with units, but in some places we will not be able to see that. So if we are not able to see that, if it is not there, then you assume that it is of a milliseconds.
Okay, sir.
Okay, so hoping things are clear for you all. I'll quickly move to cache, right? So cache is nothing but people might be familiar with cache. Nothing but what happens now in real time. Every even in your mobile phone Chrome, Google Chrome, if you go, there is something called in settings. You'll be able to see something called cache. So cache is nothing but kind of mechanism. What basically it does is it reduces the number of transactions. In the sense, what I mean to say is, for example, you wanted to means sometimes you might have experienced in your what is that mobile phone itself. If you open Facebook, right? So first time when you log in, it will take some time to log in and load your pages, and the next time you log in within some time, within some um, like for example, if I log into my Facebook page by 10 o'clock, within some minutes, like some 10:05 or 10:10, if I get into that, I'll be able to see the same page, right? So that time what happens now, it did not go and fetch the page from the database. Ideally, like everything that what you are seeing, that should be sourced from some source system, right? Nothing with some database or some APIs. Somewhere it is getting the source and it is displaying that to you. So within some time, you just came back to the same place and you will be able to see the same content available. The reason is it did not fetched from the source system, it fetched from the cache this time. So mechanism of cache is nothing but I'll tell something with the database only. For example, you wanted to get an information about one employee. Okay, so that employee number is one, for example. So the very first time you wanted to fetch the information about employee one, so you will talk to database and database returns back you the information about the employee one. Okay, the second time if you wanted to again get information about the same employee, so it is unnecessary, right? So goes back to database, test the connection and get into database, fetch data and give it back to you, right? So there actually there is a concept arrived. The concept is nothing but cache. So what will happen is the first time when you talk to database with employee ID 1, it fetches from the database, and then before sending it back to you, it will be saving in some memory, right? And then next moment you try to hit the same employee ID to get the data. What happens is that time it will not talk to the database. Instead of that, first it will go to the cache memory and check if this particular information is available. If it is available, it will fetch from the database, sorry, cache only, not from the database. So using this, we can reduce, number of interactions with the database, not only database, any source system. So how it will be helpful is like in real time, we may need to hit n number of time to database, right? So the database may go down, right? It may respond slowly if there are lot many requests, right? If many people are trying to hit the database, right? So in those cases, what we can do is using this cache, we can reduce the number of time it talks to database so that we can increase the performance. There is a less possibility of, crashing your database. All these things are there. And there are some other, you know, source systems where you have to pay. For example, if you wanted to hit not only database, like if you try to hit some endpoint and get a response, right, there will be some limitation. Like per day, you will be allowed to hit 1,000 times only. And after 1,000 times, you will not be able to hit. And if you wanted to hit after 1,000 times, you have to pay extra, something like that. Some kind of policy and some kind of licensing might be there. So in those cases, I don't want to interact with the source name n number of times. Instead of that, I can maintain a mechanism in my machine so that instead of reaching my source system, the next term, if it is available in the cache, I can get it from cache. So that is what cache is, right? So having said this, I'm going to have the same implementation here. I'm going to have something called cache in my flow. The first time I'm going to talk to database and get a response, right? And the second time onwards, I will not talk to database. Instead of talking to database, it will get the response from the cache memory only. Okay. Yeah. So what I have done is, okay, let me do it freshly for you. Okay, I have placed one logger which is outside the cache and one logger inside the cache, and select statement which will try to get employee information about the employee ID what I'm sending from my request from the postman. So it will get employee ID from my payload, which will be sent dynamically to the query, right? Then it fetches from the database and gives back the same to me, because after this I'm having the payload here. The same payload will be sent back to me. Okay, let me save it and show how it's. I have not configured anything. There are some configurations that we have to do with cache. So I have not configured anything at present. We'll see. Yeah, so I am trying to fetch information about 811. I have received a request. Let me clear the console. Logger got printed. It gets into cache for the first time. It is okay. It gets into the cache and talks to the database and got information about the employee. And then it is going to print this logger, comes out, sends back the response to me. I have to change it back to. Okay, so this is what happened for the first time. I got information about the employee 811. So if you go to the log this time, you'll be able to see the log message saying inside cache, right? Which means it discussed with the database, and from database only it fetched the data. The source of the data, what I have received, is database this time. Okay. The second time I'm going to hit the same request. It didn't get into this. If you go in console, you will not be able to see inside cache, just outside cache printed. The reason is this time it went into cache scope and found the information about the employee exist. There is a information about 811 exists in the cache memory. So it fetched from the cache memory, did not discuss with the database this time, right? So this is how cache works, right? And now what happens is this will keep on running until unless I stop my service. Okay. Next time I'm hitting the same request, it will not get into cache memory, executes outside logger only, right? Multiple times I can do the same. Now I have a different requirement where I wanted to now if I stop the service, okay, what happens? I have stopped the service and I'm going to redeploy nothing, but I'm just trying to restart my service. Okay. In that case, what happens? Whether the data, what is there in the cache memory will be persisted or not. Right. We have seen some kind of a persistent and non-persistent mechanism in object store, right? So we're gonna see here whether the data or information about the employee is persistent in the cache memory or not. Yeah. See, after restart, it is again going back to database and trying to fetch data. What happened is the message is not getting persisted, right? And that is the reason I am not able to get it from the cache memory this time after restart of my service. So it is going back to database again, then fetching the information. From next call onwards, it will not go to database. Instead of that, it will give directly from the cache memory. Right. So the difference is that is what, and now I have to enhance it. So I have a requirement where I have to persist my message all the time. How I can do that? So we will see that. And before that, one more demo I have to show. So now I am going to means the 811 which I am sending. What happens is like it is returning me with the cache data. Now if I change my employee ID from 811 to 812, which is obviously not there in the cache memory, so it will talk to database. Right. So it will discuss with the database, get a data, returns me. And now if I send again 812, what happens is this time it will not talk to database. It will give from the cache memory, right? Now you may ask a question like I wanted to get my old data, nothing but 811, whether this time it will talk to database or it will give from cache memory. The answer is it will not again go back to database. It will get it from the cache memory. So now in the cache memory, it have two employee information, right? So how it is identifying all these things like by default I'll show the configurations now, right? This is what happening, right? If it is clear for everyone, then we will deep dive into cache. Is this clear? Okay. So now there are some configurations that I wanted to do. Two things I wanted to do. I wanted to know like how my employee informations are returning back from cache memory without getting collapsed. I have two cache, 811 and 812. So how it is returning me the proper data to me, right? There may be a question. And second thing is I wanted to persist my data. How I can do that, right? So for that, you have at present I'm using default caching strategy. So default caching strategy have its own capability. So that by its own, it will understand the request is for 811 or 822. It understand that, and it a relevant message will be sent back to you. So that is already taken care by MuleSoft. Nothing to worry on that. Okay. And second thing is, using this particular strategy, default strategy, I cannot persist my data. So I wanted to persist. So for that, you have to click on refer to a strategy. I'm going to create a new strategy. So new strategy is nothing but kind of creating a connector configuration, right? So I have created a few strategies, right? I'm going to create a new one now. Right? Simply, I'm going to create a new one. Okay, so here it asks about object store. So as I told, like I wanted to persist my data. So there is a concept available in MuleSoft, something called object store. Now I'm going to use my object store to persist my data, right? I'm going to edit inline. The same, object store configurations, what we have done, the same will be listed for you. Now I'm going to create a new object store kind of stuff. And maybe I can consider this as this strategy. I can change it to maybe, persistent. Okay, the display name that is. And now alias name, like that is nothing but the object store name. I'm going to give object store name as a persist. The same name I can give, or else I can give any other name also. It doesn't matter. Like I'm going to give the same, and I have enabled the persistent, and all these configurations you people are aware. Time to live you aware, like how much time you wanted to persist the data, you can configure that, right? And there is something called a key expression. So here it is very important. You have to configure key expression, nothing but which particular, you know, a particular column that you are going to queue as a reference, which means I'm going to refer employee ID as my reference, right? So I have to specify that. That will be there in my, let me see where it will be. Yeah, it is in payload EMP ID. Okay. So I'm going to refer that. So I'm going to say employee ID is the reference key, right, that you have to use. We all know like there should be a key enabled, right? So that is what I am configuring here. So employee ID will be the element. With that, it will refer whether I'm giving employee ID 811 or 812 or 813. So it will understand in such way. Now I have enabled persistent, clicked OK. The same strategy I have to select here. Yeah, I have selected the strategy, nothing else. I'm not going to do anything else at all now. Let me save it. So last time we have not used any strategies. So after restart, my data was lost. Now I'm going to maintain it. Not only just persisting my data, I can configure the time to live also here, right? With the default strategy, I cannot configure that. Deploy. So this time I'm going to hit the request. Since I have configured my cache newly, so first time it will talk to database only, right? Returns me back, and second and the same request I'm going to give. It will not get into cache, right? So this time I'm going to stop my service and redeploy my service. Okay. So this time I'm going to hit the same request. Let me see it gets into the cache or not. This time also did not get into cache. The reason is I have stored my cache in my object store now, and that object store is persisted. Right? Since it is persistent, I will not lose my data at any cost, even after server crash or even after my service down. So at any situation, I will not be losing my data. So likewise, you can configure. And now there is something called invalidate cache. What invalidate cache does is I have to select the same strategy. I have used a persistent strategy as the old one. So what basically it does is it will delete the data, or it will delete the cache. In fact, delete, or I can say is invalidate. So that will disable that cache. So what happens after this one? I have put invalidate cache. So what will happen is like every time it try to get the data, it saves the data in a cache memory. Then after seeing this one, it will delete that. So let me show that also to you. The invalidate cache is straightforward. Which particular cache strategy you want to invalidate? So this will be useful in some real-time experience. Like, so you have saved some, what is that? Sensitive data, and those data you don't wanted to maintain in a cache after executing that. In fact, right? Means what I mean to say is, I have a big flow where I wanted to get information about the same employee more than one time. Okay. And that actually I wanted to get within the flow only. Once the flow is getting executed, once the flow is executed, I don't want to have or maintain anything in the cache memory, right? This time what happened is, even after the service executed, even after the server restart, or even after the flow is executed successfully, the data is still persisted or maintained in the object store, right? I don't want to have it. I wanted to use my data in many of the places, but once I have consumed everything, I wanted to invalidate. For example, if I give a password somewhere and that password needs to be maintained for that particular session only, and after the session is done, it should invalidate. So before ending the session, I can use the invalidate cache, so that before closing that flow, it will delete all the data from the cache, then it will complete it. So that's what I'm going to do now. Redeploy. Okay, first time I'm going to hit a request. It didn't get into cache. The reason is the cache still have a data. Now I'm going to delete, invalidate the cache, execute it. Now second time I'm going to hit the request. It gets into cache. The reason is now the cache data is lost. So you may ask a question, why unnecessarily we have a set cache and delete cache, right? The reason I have just told, like you wanted to use the data in more than one places, go for cache. And I don't want to maintain it in a persistent mode. Sorry, I don't want to have it after my execution or after my successful completion of the transaction. I don't want to maintain it. You can invalidate it. Any questions? Yeah. So this is what all about cache. Now we will go into an interesting topic called batch processing. In fact, batch processing is very huge. I mean, it will take definitely some 20 to 30 minutes to get a better understanding. So meantime, we'll try to see any other things that we can cover for next 5 or 10 minutes. And yeah, so this batch processing, I'll plan to move to next day. Let me see if we can have anything else. Okay, let me try to say something about email. Okay. So that would be interesting for you. And there are some validations also available. So you can use those validations also. If you type validation, you'll be able to see a lot of validations, right? So we all know how IP looks like. It will be having 4 sections. Each section will be separated with a dot operator, right? So I wanted to check if I'm getting something from my request that is proper IP, not proper in the sense like it is a proper format of IP address. If it is that, it throws, I mean, it will not throw error. If it is not in proper order, it throws error. So I'm going to use this one. I have just to configure the is IP, very simple configuration. What you have to do is you have to just drag and drop here, and then you have to get into some configuration, right? Module configuration. Let me see if I think create. Yeah, I have created one validation. So you click press and create a new one. Nothing. You don't need to give anything. Like generally, it can be bundle path local not required. Like none only you select and click OK, and then which particular field you're going to validate. I'm going to validate field which is there in my payload.ip. I'm going to send something in my payload in the tag of IP, right? And if that is in a proper IP structure, it will not throw error. If it is not in proper structure, it says error saying invalid IP format. Likewise, we have lot many things. Is not null. If you wanted to check any field is not null, you can use this. And is true. If you wanted to check any field is true or not, like you can use this. Likewise, we have lot many things are there. I'm going to use 1 or 2, and remaining things you people explore. And now I'm going to check use URL. So URL, we all know how URL should look like, right? I mean, it's the same I'm going to do here, not valid URL. And payload.url is the one which I'm going to validate. Okay, let me see what happens. And then if the both are correct, then I'm going to send a message saying both IP and URL are valid. So to configure send email, you have to do some pre-settings. Let me show one by one that to you. Send email is the connector that you have to use. I'm going to use my Gmail, right? So few configuration you have to follow blindly. In the sense, the connector configuration at present, I'm having email SFTP. So this email SMTP, I'm going to edit it, right? So you have to give your username and your password, and the port for Gmail is 587. So don't change it. Use the same port, and the host for Gmail is smtp.gmail.com. So the same you have to use, right? And in advanced, I have not configured anything. I have left to main. I mean, sorry. In advanced, also you have to configure one thing. So you get into advanced, then properties. You click on edit inline, then click on plus. You'll be able to see this kind of property. I'm going to add one property. That property name should be mail dot smtp dot start start, right? tsl dot enable, and you have to say true or false. Then click finish. So I have created two properties, right? Sorry, tsl, not tls. Sorry, tls. I have a typo error. So mail.smtp.start tl, sorry, tsl dot enable, and the value should be true. Okay. So this is what you have to give. And then in general section, you have to give these configurations. Then click OK. Enough. Go back to your send email, right? You have selected the configuration, and then from address you have to give, and to address you have to give, edit inline you press. Then you can add n number of email addresses, the two recipient address. You finish, and then you will be able to add one more. Likewise, you can have n number of two address, and if you have any CC, you can mention BCC, you can mention reply to the address, you can mention, and then a subject you can specify, and then payload you can specify what you have to put it in a mail content, you can specify, and then the transfer encoding format, let it be base 64. By default it will be base 64 only. And you wanted to change your mail content type, you can change it, and if you have any attachment, you can attach it. Okay, how to get attachment I will tell later. For now I'm going to send a simple email. Okay, and this is what I have configured here in this place. I have configured my from email address, my Gmail address, and to address is my corporate ID. And then what all I'm using, I have not configured any BCC, CC. I have a subject like mail, send email, and the content of the mail should be both IP and URL are valid. This is what I'm going to send. And I don't have any attachment in my mail. Then one more thing you have to do in your browser, go to your browser, and let me have a, you have to get into this particular portal, myaccount.google.com.less secure apps, right? By default it will be disabled, so allow less secure app on. So I have to enable it. Until unless you enable it, you cannot send a mail from your Mule Studio, right? So it is secured in fact, so I'm just reducing the security in Gmail, right? So just to check, if you are not finding this URL, just type this one, less secure app access in your Google browser. You will be able to get this page. You can enable, or you can turn it on or turn it off. So to send a mail, you should turn it on. I have turned it on, and nothing else I'm going to do. Simple, right? Let me save and trigger the request for this one. Let me see what is the URL. Send email. So my payload should have two elements. One is IP, and the second one is URL. Right. Okay. I had a breakpoint here. So it is executed successfully. Since I have not altered my payload, I have got the request payload, same request payload in my response. So what would have happened is my final log executed, which means sent, which I have placed at the end, right? And let me go to my mailbox and see if I have, yeah, I have received a mail from Vasant Kumar GS 1989@gmail.com, right? And the body of the mail is mule send email, and the content of the mail is both IP and URL are valid, right? And now I'm going to give something wrong in my request. So instead of, I mean, this is what any IP looks like. This is how any IP looks like right now. I'm going to change the structure. I'm going to change the structure of the IP. Let me see what happens. It is in is IP, checks that it is failing there saying invalid IP format, because that is not a proper IP, sends the response to me saying invalid IP format. Now I'm going to change it back to the proper format, and let me try to have some other in the URL. I'm not passing the URL. So this time it will pass here, it will fail here. Oh, still invalid. Okay, instead of giving integer number, I have given O. So this time it will pass here, and then I'm gonna fail here. Failed saying in not valid URL, right? Then message won't be sent. So likewise, you can add more is condition. Is email or is empty collection is false, is not blacklisted IP. So likewise, you can use all these, any of these, right? You can use number, sorry, is number, is time, is true, right? There will be a proper structure for everything. So if you give proper structure, it will validate. So these validations you can have in your flow in such way, like in real-time experience, maybe we wanted to validate something, right? So for that, we will find very hard to write a logic. There is no validation for IP. You have to specify something, like you have to write a big logic to achieve whether it is IP or not, right? So all these things are brought to you in very simple form, having this kind of components. You can use and make use of any of this component, and then yeah, and you can even use match rejects also, regular expressions. So for any particular validation, if you wanted to check the request what you're sending, it is of alphabet, there is a rejects for that. And if it is like lowercase alphabet, then there is a rejects. And if it is uppercase, there is a reject. So for any of this format, there is a rejects, actually regular expression. So you try to get the regular expression from online. So you can type in Google and search, like I wanted to get a rejects pattern for integer numbers, or else like alphanumeric numbers, or else smaller case alphabets. You type that, you'll be getting a regular expression. So bring that regular expression and put it here and check if that is matching or not. Module, I'm going to select any of this module, and the value and the pattern. Value is nothing but, for example, if I wanted to check my employee ID, right? And that employee ID is a number or not, if I wanted to check, there should be a rejects pattern. Okay, and that rejects pattern you can give here, and you will not find very difficult to get it. You go to browser and go to Google and just type rejects for lower case letters. Okay, yeah, this is the regular expression. So you can take and you can give this regular expression here, and maybe payload dot, what is it, maybe name. So likewise, you can use and then check if it is like properly fragmented, or if it is a proper expression or not. Means the value what I'm giving, so that is matching with the pattern or not. All right. So that is what. So if any questions, we can discuss on that, or else like we'll in the next class we will see batch processing and few other components. I'm done for the day. If any questions, we can discuss, or else we can join back on Monday. So I'm not hearing from people like whether we can have a session tomorrow or not. So better we'll cancel the session tomorrow and we'll have session from Monday. Any questions? Okay. Okay. Thank you guys then. Happy festival day. Enjoy your days. Long weekend. It's going to be enjoy and then see back you on Monday. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.